Hi there, and welcome to this week's edition of Career Insights from 1080. So today I am joined by one of my clients, Carolyn Fraser, who I worked with a couple of years ago to talk all about her successful move in terms of her career. So she has got lots of stories to talk about from when we worked together. So it's going to be really lovely to talk to her. As always, please do like, comment, and ask any questions you have throughout the session just to make it as interactive as possible. So welcome, Caroline. Thank you very much for coming along.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. So can we just kind of get started by, if you maybe just give us a brief background into your previous role and what made you decide to change sector?
Yeah, well, I worked for AXA Insurance, and I'd done various jobs in the 30 plus years that I worked there, from underwriter to my last role was as a sort of data analyst collating international motor claims data. And at the time, AXA were looking at a third-party provider to produce a new computer system to collect all the data and to then present it in a sort of a usable form, because obviously getting data from different countries meant it was in all different formats. The unfortunate side was then, of course, because they were going to have a system that would collect all this and produce the data, they decided that that could be run out of one of their offices in India, and so my role became redundant. So to start with, I sort of thought, well, I'll just stay in the same sector that I've always been in. But then as I sort of thought more about it, I felt, well, this was my ideal opportunity to actually try something completely different. And I thought after more than 30 years of working in the private sector, it would be really nice to try for either a public sector role or working in, say, a school, a high school or a primary school as a sort of school business manager. So these were my sort of ideas of sectors that I wanted to change to.
Excellent. Yeah, I remember we had quite a lot of conversations, didn't we, about how
Yes.
possibly some of because you've done lots and lots of volunteering over the years, haven't you? So how some of that could sort of influence your decision and help you possibly move into something
Move
new.
into different, yes, exactly.
Okay, so what kind of approach did you have then? So when you were looking for companies and how they appealed to you, did you have a strategy in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first sort of thought was to apply to be a school business manager. So I started looking at local primary schools and high schools, and through that realised that in Suffolk, where I'm based, there was a particular site called Suffolk Jobs Direct that had all the public sector jobs that are available through Suffolk County Council, the East Suffolk Council, and all the schools. So you had to sign up to that. So I signed up to that, which meant that I was getting regular emails through of job vacancies. Of course, there was lots and lots of jobs coming through. So I really had to do quite a lot of filtering to then just get through jobs that were in the sectors that I looked for. But I think doing that made me realise what it was, because job titles were completely different to what I was used to. So once I was then aware of job titles in sort of roles that I felt I could do, I then was able to go on to things like Indeed and other local websites, and I would be able to, once I knew job titles, I could then do more specific searches on things like Indeed, because again, they're just such a vast array of jobs. It was very difficult to find. I did look in LinkedIn as well, but I don't think I used it as extensively as because I know that I worked with you on LinkedIn, and so as my awareness of LinkedIn became better, I started using it. And now I now keep an eye on, I still sort of like keep an eye on the job market. And so look at LinkedIn and these specific sites for public sector jobs. So I think my advice would be looking specifically, because the search is so vast that it's almost have a few ideas of things you would like to do, and then you can be more specific in your search.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, as you know, there's so many different filters on the job search engine on LinkedIn and other job search engines as well, that it is really important to use those to really target down your search, as you've said.
Yeah.
That point you made about the job titles being totally different, that's a really big learning point, isn't it? And I think that's something that is really, really useful to people. And again, going back to the filters, one of the things you can do on LinkedIn is search for particular skills. So if you don't know what the job title is going to be, that's quite a good way of doing that. So you could put in keywords for whatever the skills are. So if it's kind of, I don't know, calendar management or diary management, or booking meetings, or whatever it might be, you could put in those skills and public sector, for instance, and then that will then give you the results of some possible job title. So definitely a really useful thing.
Yeah.
And you were very targeted, weren't you? You didn't just fire your CV off all over the place. You were quite
No,
determined and focused.
yes. I mean, I think I probably applied for about maybe 15 jobs in total. I think about 3 or 4 of those were for school business managers, and the rest were in the sort of like Suffolk County Council public sector roles. So yes, I was very specific. If the job didn't match what I wanted to do, I didn't apply for it, because I think I was worried about, having worked for a company for so long, I was worried that they would look at, oh, you've only ever worked for one company and its different iterations. So I thought, I'm just going to be very specific in what I apply for and not just do a scattergun approach.
Yeah, and I think from what I remember, you got quite good feedback from most things you applied for, didn't you? There wasn't many where you heard nothing back.
No, I mean, most of them, I was very surprised, to be honest, because
Mm,
from what I'd heard from anecdotally, was that I wouldn't even get a response.
mm,
But I did get a response, and I think everyone I applied for, they came back and at least said, no, we're not looking at the moment. I think a few of them probably thought that I was sort of discounted because I had worked somewhere else for so long and it was a change, but they wouldn't necessarily use that as a reason. But yeah,
yeah.
no, I did get good responses to even the ones where I didn't get an interview.
That's good. And do I remember correctly as well that you phoned a couple of the schools to have a chat with them before you sent the application in as
Yes,
well? Yeah.
yes, and just to sort of, I think it was, I had a friend who had done that on different roles, and it was phoning up to just sort of say, I'm sending in an application. I haven't actually done this role before, but if you look at my CV, I feel I've got the skills matching what you're looking for, just to, to sort of put that application in and make them aware, so that they didn't look at the CV and just completely discount it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would think I think that's worth doing, especially if you're, changing sectors like I was.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as you say, the phone call is really important because so few people actually pick up the phone these days. I think it's
Yeah,
definitely going to kind of put you a step ahead. So
yeah.
I've got a couple of comments in. So Alison saying great advice about putting in key skills into the search. And then a question focused to you really, Carolyn. So what were the barriers for applying for public sector coming from private sector? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think it was probably, I think they would wonder why I was changing sector after so long. Um, Now, I suppose I'll never know whether the ones that I got a response to say thank you, but no thank you, whether that was because they'd looked at my CV and didn't feel that I had the right skills, or whether it was because they thought that I'd been in the private sector for too long. But I think once I got to the interview stage, the barriers were able to be removed, because I could then explain that I had sort of closely looked at what they were looking for, and for skills wise, and then sort of say how I felt that I matched these skills. So I think probably the main barrier is actually just getting past that stage. But if there was the opportunity to have a phone call, you could explain yourself and say, once it got the interview stage, I think the barriers had gone.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how you would get, the initial barriers, but having the skills-based CV, I think definitely got me through the door of a lot of places.
Yeah. So Paul's there saying the phone call can make all the difference. So yes, thank you.
Yes.
And that goes on nicely to the next question, which was how did you compile your CV for a change of sector?
Well, that was definitely thanks to you, Sarah, because I worked with you and we went over what sort of sectors that I wanted to work in, and you put together a CV for me that had the different sections. So because I was looking for business manager, or the title that they use in at least Suffolk County Council is business support officer. So they would split it into administrative skills and people skills, under various headings. So Sarah helped me put the CV together under those headings. So as I was applying for jobs, I would mix and match the skills under the heading. And then we also went over doing a covering letter that would pinpoint all the items in the job description and sort of cover how I felt I could meet all of those. And on the ones that I had, because I think I had I had 4 interviews in the end, because I interviewed twice for this job, which we'll come to. But each of them said that they felt the CV was very strong. It did outline the skills that I was then enumerating in the interviews. So they realised that it wasn't just words on paper. It was actually, skills that I had. And I think that definitely helped me change sectors, because I was able to sort of put the experience that I'd had in the private sector and see how I could use that in the public sector.
Excellent. So yeah, highly tailoring the CV and the letter for each role was definitely a winner. And I think all of your roles were direct with the organisation as well, weren't they? There weren't any through agencies.
Yeah, no, they were all direct with the organisation. And I think that's another thing. I would definitely say that if you could get to the organisation rather than through the agency, that is a bonus, because you're not being not getting to a short list because the agency have decided you're not suitable. And I think if you're changing sectors, it definitely helps if you can get straight to the organisation.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we're going on to what you just sort of alluded to. So you didn't initially get the role that you've got now. So how did all that change? So you just talk a little bit about the sort of the interview experiences you had and how you ended up where you are.
All the interviews, because I was looking sort of June, July 2020, all the interviews I had were online. So I actually felt that was an advantage, because it had been so long since I'd had an interview from an outside company. I'd had interviews for roles while I worked at AXA. So the job that I have now, I did interview, and it was online, and it was with the person who did the role and the finance director and a couple of others. And I thought the interview had gone quite well, but at the end they sort of said, it was you did quite well, but there was somebody else who we preferred for the role. But would they, could they keep in touch with me if anything else came up, because they thought that I had interviewed well. So I said yes, they could. So I did keep in touch with them. I sent an email, I think a few weeks later, just saying, I'm still interested if anything else comes up. But then it was about a month after that, the finance director called and said the person that they'd offered the job to they didn't give the reasons, but had decided not to take it. And they would like to re-interview me and one other person who'd interviewed strongly. So I think that keeping in touch helped by saying, sort of, I'm still interested. So I had a second interview, and that was done by the therapists who I would actually be working for. And that interview was very different, because they then asked, I think the first interview had almost covered just my background and some skills, but this interview they picked up on the volunteering work that I'd done, because that was more public sector. And I felt I had much better chance at that interview to actually express the skills that I had that I felt were transferable. And I mean, they interviewed the other person, and then I got a call that day to offer me the role. So yeah, I think it's persistence in if you're interested in a job is sort of like, don't give up. And I had had another interview for a role which was just a 9-month role, which was with the police, but they have to do, because it was working with data, they have to do a whole series of checks. So I had actually accepted that role, but the job that I have now was the one that I preferred. So when they offered me it, I then had to go back and tell the police that I wasn't going to work for them. So a fortunate position to be in, but I think I'm glad I took the one I did.
Yes. So again, that leads on to the next question about, so you did have the 2 offers. How did you decide which one to take? Was it kind of gut instinct, or was it about the contracts lengths?
It was partly about the contract, and also, well, I think after I had accepted the one I have now, I then got a call from the third place that I'd interviewed for, which was West Suffolk Council, and offering me the job as well. So I did have the decision with the one I'd accepted, the one that I wanted, and the other one. So the first one with the police was only a 9-month contract, which they said would probably be extended. But I just felt I wanted a bit more security than 9 months, because I thought it was going to take 3 months for them to get through all the checks. So I'd only be in the role 6 months potentially. The other one that I was offered in West Suffolk Council, I just, at the time, the job that I have is less travelling. As it's turned out, with the way COVID's gone, I think both jobs would have been working from home. But at the time, I think the job I've got edged it. I think it was probably mainly gut instinct of the 2 jobs. I thought, no, this one I think I would prefer.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. I mean, and to be in that position, three offers is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, I was.
Really good.
Very lucky.
And so, did you find it difficult to kind of go back and decline the one that you'd already accepted? Was that a tough conversation?
Yeah, it was. I think I felt worse about it than the conversation ended up being very easy. I was just worried about it because at that point I thought I would be going into the Suffolk County Council offices, and they're in the same building as Suffolk Police. So I just felt that I could meet the people who'd interviewed me in the in the canteen or whatever. So I was worried about the conversation, but it went very well. And I was just very honest and said that I'd accepted their job, but I'd been asked for re-interview for a job that I'd had the initial interview before the police job. And it was like a full, a permanent job. And it did appeal to me better. It was more of a change. I think the police job would have been more data analysis, which was sort of what I was doing, and I did want the change. So, but they were very good about it, and it was more my fears of having the conversation than the actual conversation.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think people think, yeah, I'd really like to have multiple offers, but then the reality of, that means I've got to disappoint somebody afterwards. Yeah. I think a lot of people really struggle with that. So it's good to hear that it was a good, positive conversation anyway. And again, it's keeping that door open, isn't it? For in the future, you never know if something came up again.
Yes, exactly.
You'd feel comfortable and go for it again. So Alison's saying, great, you say showing interest is definitely a game changer, I think. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've mentioned volunteering in passing. So you are an active volunteer, and that was definitely portrayed on your CV. So do you think that helped you in the job search?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly if you're changing sectors, because you can say that you haven't just done one activity. Like, I keep going back to it, but because I had just worked for AXA, I didn't have other experience, and so I could, in interviews, I can say, well, I worked in lots of different departments and did various roles. But I think having the volunteering as a backup, because they know then you're involved in committees, you're meeting different people, you have a different set of skills probably. And the second interview for the role I have now, they very much focused on that and asked me lots of questions, because some of the skills would be similar to the ones that I needed. So I think if you've got any volunteering, it's, don't forget about the skills that you have from that area of your life. It's not just work skills. Volunteering skills definitely help.
Yeah, and I guess also if you haven't done any volunteering before and you are maybe looking for work, out of work at the moment, it's a really good opportunity to try and get some volunteering work, isn't it? To kind of A, fill the gap, but B, have something else to put on your CV as well when it comes to it.
Because actually, I think when I sort of went off the idea of being the school business manager, I mean, partly because there was very few roles about. But I think we had a conversation at the time, Sarah, about I had been a governor before, which was one of the roles that I'd done when my children were smaller, but was then thinking about, well, perhaps potentially going for a governor's role in a high school, if I was going to be like a business manager for a high school, because then you're getting to see, because I found being a governor for a primary school, you really get involved in sort of primary education. So to do that for a high school, so I think it's sort of like being focused. And the other thing that I'd sort of forgotten about was I thought if I'm going for a school business manager, it's looking for skills that they would potentially need. And I had never done first aid training. So I was going to sign up to do first aid training, although that was put on hold anyway because of COVID. But it's sort of almost like preempting skills that they might ask for, because I thought that way I could go to the interview and say, well, I'm not first aid trained, but I've got this course coming up in 2 months. So I think it's anything you can do that just gives you that edge, an extra skill that you would have.
Yeah, that's good. And we just had a question in from Laura, and that kind of relates to what you've just been talking about, actually. So did you have any concerns about change in sector, and how did you overcome them?
I think my concern was actually, would I be able to do it? Would I A, get any interviews, and B, then if I did get a job, would I be able to cope working, in a completely different sector? But as it's turned out, it does feel different not working for profit, as it were. But the skills and the actual job role is very similar. So I think it's just sort of try not to worry too much, and have faith in the skills that you've got, that you will adapt in the new role. When you get the job, it's you've still got the same knowledge. It's just learning a different way of working, but you're still putting the same skills to use.
Yeah, and I think particularly if you worked in the same organisation for a long time, you kind of think, well, I know how to do this, but that's not going to relate anywhere outside. And I think everyone says later on, it's amazing actually how everything I've learned there, it is relevant outside.
Yeah,
and in
absolutely.
some cases, you're way ahead of where you might be in terms of like technology and things like that.
Yeah.
In other cases, you might have a bit of learning, but
yeah. I mean, that for me is a definite, because I work with therapists. They're employed for their ability to work with families, but very few of them have IT skills. So that's, I really can help them out in, using Excel and SharePoint and whatever. So I'm at an advantage to them, and, that is useful.
Yeah. So Laura says, thanks, good advice. And Gabby says, hello, say hi there. So thank you for joining. And I think possibly one of the issues of moving from sort of private sector to public sector in some cases is kind of financial, really. And I guess if that's okay with you, then you need to kind of get that across somehow in the interview.
Yes, I mean, I that was going to be the case, and it's the salary I was taking for my new role was less than that I had, but that's another point of, I think, having a phone call or mentioning it in the application form for the role that I have. You had to put your current salary, because although they sent a CV, they then sent back an application form, a sort of one-page application form. So you had to put your current salary, and there was a box for comments. So I put in the comment box there that I knew what the salary was for the role I was going, and was happy for that, because I think that could be a barrier.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely worth having the phone call or an email or whatever to say that you understand what the salary is if it's lower than, you know, what you were working in.
What you've been able to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose sometimes the salary isn't the only thing, is it? You might be learning new things, and that's more important to you at that particular
Yeah.
stage in your career. So obviously, money is a big determiner for some people, but not necessarily for everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, just think about your own circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, so and now you have also got a charity trustee position. So how did that come about?
Well, I've got two friends who decided to set up a charity. They both went to Newcastle University, and they wanted to have a charity that would help disadvantaged young women or young women from disadvantaged backgrounds to study STEM subjects at Newcastle University. So when they were looking to set up the charity, they were looking for various friends to help them out and become charity trustees. And they said that they asked me to be one of the trustees because of my past volunteering experience. And obviously it was about the time that I was looking for new roles, and I had done volunteering, and one or two of the roles were coming to an end because of COVID. So yeah, so I jumped at the chance to actually, because I had never been a trustee before. I'd, done various voluntary roles, but hadn't been a trustee. So that's been a really good learning curve. And it's also, I think, I would recommend, a charity trustee position if you can find one, because it's just, yeah, you're using skills that you probably have, but it's a different way of working. And I think it just helps you see how charities are set up and how organizations work. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's really good. It's very good, isn't it? We talked yesterday about the fact that I've got one as well. We talked a bit about that, and it can be quite a significant amount of work. But as you say, you're exposed to quite a lot of things that you probably wouldn't normally be in your paid position, I guess.
Yes, and it's the sort of offshoot of it is I've had conversations with the CEO of the company I work for now, because he is a charity trustee for a cafe in Cambridge where people who are recovering from drug or alcohol abuse work, and it gives them employment, so they can then put that on their CV. So because of that, I was then asked to, and the company I work for, Family Psychology Mutual, are a community interest company. So we're all employee owners. So we were advertising for an employee owner director, and I was involved in the interview panel for that. And then we're looking for 2 non-executive directors. So again, was on the interview panel. And I think that's partly because they knew that I was a charity trustee. I've got different skills in the organisation compared to everyone who's got a therapy background. So they wanted that sort of business view. So I think all of those have probably come about because they know that I'm a charity trustee, and I have different skills to people who work there currently.
Yeah, brilliant. And we talked a little bit yesterday, didn't we, about the kind of the differences and similarities between charity trustee and non-exec director, and that one could potentially lead to the other at some point.
Yes, absolutely.
So
yeah, I
lots
think
of
it's
career.
A springboard if you wanted a non-exec position. Then if you're a charity trustee, it's you're sort of halfway there.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Well, we are about at the end of our time now. So as always, what we will end with was a top tip. So if there's something that you can advise people or recommend that they do, Carolyn, that would be great.
I've got a couple. The first one I think is definitely, if you're moving sectors, go for a skill-based CV rather than just a list of your roles, the various roles. And I think the second one is persistence. It's sort of like that, not giving up, because I think if you want to change sectors, you have to be persistent. And even when you think an opportunity's gone, it's often not, as I've discovered. And I've been in the role now for about a year and a half, and Yeah, absolutely love the job. So yeah, I would definitely say it's persistence.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it? The kind of the keeping actual communication with people, whether
Yes.
it's email or phone calls beforehand, whatever it is, it definitely makes a massive difference, as you proved
Yeah.
by getting 3 job offers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank
thanks for your
you.
help.
Thank you. So next week I will be joined by Jill Amos, and we will be talking about taking a break between jobs. So quite a lot of our clients now are taking a bit of time out, and whether that's to do with COVID and kind of reassessing their work, etc. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So thank you again, Carolyn. And thanks to everyone watching. If you do have any other questions afterwards, please do feel free to ask questions, and we will come back and answer them later. So actually, we've got a few comments coming, so I'll just quickly put them up. So Alison saying, great session, ladies. Thank you for your openness, Carolyn. And well supported by a fantastic coach. Oh, thank
Yeah,
you, Alison.
absolutely.
Thank you. William saying, thank you. Interesting discussion. And Paul is saying, really interesting. Thank you, Carolyn. So thanks again. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.